Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hello and welcome to the A24 project here on the Nerd Party Network. I'm Lee Hutchison, and Dallas King and myself make our way through the A24 filmography, and along the way bring you interviews with the talent involved in front of and behind the camera. It's been over 2 years since the end of Ramy Season 2, and to mark the long-awaited return of Season 3, I'm excited to bring you an interview with Laith Zuaiter, an actor, writer, director and producer who started working in the industry with Mike Mills's 20th Century Women, before going on to work behind the scenes and star on Ramy. It was an absolute pleasure to learn about Laith's story and journey, and I hope you too will enjoy our conversation.
For the first time in the history of our country, a majority of our people believe that the next 5 years will be worse than the past 5 years. It is a crisis of confidence. But just as we're losing our confidence in the future, we're also beginning to close the door on our past.
Have you always been interested in the kind of creative arts?
I have been. As a kid, I wasn't sure about it. My father's an actor, and he quit his job in order to become an actor, and we moved to New York like a year after 9/11 happened. And a lot of the roles that he was getting weren't roles that I could see myself in, and in some way I was kind of embarrassed of his job. I remember a kid telling me that my dad was on Law and Order playing, a terrorist or whatever, and I'd be like, oh, that's just weird, It's weird to hear as a kid. But at the same time, I didn't realize, I didn't have the foresight to realize the depth that my father was giving to those types of roles. And the fact that, those were the only roles that he could do to feed the family at the time, in the early 2000s. And I was lucky enough as a kid to follow my dad on auditions and stay in the waiting rooms. And my sister and I were waiting in this one waiting room. My dad comes out with Spike Lee. And my dad had told Spike Lee that we went to this elementary school in Brooklyn called PS 29. And Spike Lee went to the same elementary school. So he wanted to meet us and talk to us. And as soon as he saw me and my sister, he was like, oh, you guys should audition for this pilot that we're doing. And the pilot was centered around this interim mayor who makes a wrong call on a suspected terrorist and kills an innocent guy. And the mayor ends up having to apologize to different people in the community and apologize to the family. And Spike wanted my sister and I to audition for the kids that of the suspected terrorist. And and I ended up booking the job, and it was such a weird kind of full circle moment for me to realize that the arts can be used to bring out truths in society and have commentaries on things that most productions are afraid of commenting on, and it was a pilot that never got picked up, but it was something that stood for way more than I could realize. At the time, I just got inspired and I wanted to start acting and making my own films. And after that experience, my parents were like, you're not going to be a child star. You're not. I was 7 or 8 years old when I did that. So at the end of the day, they were like, if you really want to do it, you'll do it on your own time. And I was able to do that with my friends in high school. But graduating, I didn't end up going the regular route of going to college right away. I basically didn't get into any of the schools that I really wanted to go to. Ended up going to community college. And my father ended up getting cast in a film called 20th Century Women by Mike Mills. And I was looking to do work in any capacity possible. I was willing to do unpaid work. And there was this program at my community college, and it was a cooperative education program where you could work a bunch of hours on set and get school credit for it. And so I proposed that to my dad, and I was like, is it possible that, you know, I know the production just started and there's a lot more time. Can I, you know, apply to be like a unit PA or like a locations intern or something? And my dad ended up getting me on set, getting an interview, and I got to work on that set for free, which was nice because I wasn't driving at the time, but you know, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful reminder of like the importance my mom has in my life as well. My mom was driving me to and from set, and yeah, that experience was so beautiful. I got to see my dad acting on set for the first time since I was a kid, and seeing the space that he needed to take in order to like relax himself. Like I forgot that that was something that can be allowed on set, you know? And I'm amongst all this chaos, and I just see my father in the corner just like meditating. And it's, I don't know, it's the types of sets like that, like just really inspired me. Like Mike Mills would bring like a cellist, and the cellist would play in the morning while we were getting breakfast. And it was just such a beautiful environment to be around that it kind of like, I feel like I've been spoiled being on set. Like I've had such great environments to be around, and there's some people that tell me their experiences that are the complete opposite, you know?
You worked as like a production intern on 20th Century Women. What does that kind of role specifically involve?
I was a multitasker, honestly, on set. Like I was doing everything a unit PA was doing. At least now, having the knowledge that I have now, I was basically a unit PA for the locations department. I was working for this locations department. They call themselves Schoolboy Set Services, and they're great. The Dan Cooley and Dan Alvarado, just so nice, and like took me under their wing, and I would go on scouts with them, and you know, basically clearing up trash from set and like making sure that you know, everything a unit PA would do in terms of making sure that set's clear, or you know, that there's light in a certain area, you know, helping out locations with certain things. And then at the same time, I was lucky enough, because I was not getting paid, they couldn't ask me to do too much because it was like against union rules in a way. So I would get the opportunity to just like go around set and just watch people's performances. And I got lucky enough to talk to like Annette Bening, because she was acting with my father, and she was such a beautiful presence. And it's so funny, I've run into her multiple times since working on that film, and every time I've run into her and I've come up to her and said, hey, she was just such a like truly like such a warm presence. Like she remembers you. She, you know, it's like you jumped back where you left off with her. I'm constantly reminded that the idea that I had of Hollywood, of it being this superficial, crazy, chaotic place, you know, those expectations are put to sleep when I meet these types of people, because there's such a groundedness that such professionals, you know, come to set with. Like they come with such an innate groundedness. And it was beautiful to see people like Annette Bening not taking herself too seriously, and walking around and always greeting everyone and greeting the crew members, and actually treating everyone like they're part of this bigger family, you know? And I've seen that in shows like Ramy and other sets that I've worked on. And I think we're lucky to be in this transitional phase of this industry where it matters how you treat people, you know? Before it was like, who gives a fuck, we're famous, you know? Nobody cares. But now it's like, know where you're stepping, you know?
And did you interact much with Mike Mills in your role, or was he someone that you would kind of watch from afar almost when you were sort of on the set?
I wanted to make sure I kept a distance, but I think because I kept a distance, he somehow found himself coming to me, which was nice because, I mean, he knew I was my father's son. Such a weird way to say that. But he knew who I was, and I had met him the first day I got on set, and he was very nice. I became friends with his costume designer on set. I was notorious for wearing Hawaiian shirts on set. And one day she came up to me, and I'd met her through my dad on set. My dad had become friends with her as well. We ended up talking on set. She came up to me and she was like, "Hey, I put Greta in a Hawaiian shirt today because of you." I was like, "Oh, cool." And we just started talking and becoming friends, and I was like getting to know her, and she was teaching me about just all the things that she had learned from previous sets she'd been on. I was a fan of Beginners. I was watching that film around the time I was working on set, and I know she had also designed a costume designed that movie, and we were talking about it on set. I remember sitting with her at lunch, and Mike just came up and sat with us, and we just started talking about the film, and I don't know, it was such a beautiful moment because I felt like Mike is the type of guy that he's very purposeful with every film he makes, and no matter what, he wants to make every environment he creates like a family environment. And I just felt that warmth, even though he's such a he feels like a very awkward guy at first, but he's such a warm presence when you get to like sit with him. And I was just so grateful. I went to a screening that he had at the Silent Movie Theater in LA, and he was doing a Q&A, and like barely anybody came. It was like a very small audience, and I brought my whole family, and it was just nice to reconnect with him again that time as well. Like, he's just a very him and his wife Miranda July, like, or his partner, I think they both have such I've had friends who have worked on both of their sets, and I feel like they have such a reverence for the people who make cinema possible, that every time they make a film, they want to make sure they're making the most out of every moment that they have on set, and they're not taking any time for granted. Like, they're finding so much time to get so much done. And I never felt like he was ever going over time either. Like, that was a beautiful thing, was to see him end his days on time and still get everything he needed because he was so focused that way. He came to set dressed in a suit every day, and like, it was such a, I think he's also such an older director, like, and people don't even realize that. Everyone thinks he's like a newer age director, but he's a old time, like, he directed a lot of ads growing up, and like, he comes from the space of like the older generation where it was acceptable to wear a suit to direct. And you know, I kind of appreciated that. I was like, if I ever get an opportunity to direct a feature, and I hope I do, I would want to start my first one wearing a suit. Maybe not the ones preceding, but yeah.
I think you've definitely got to get onto that IMDb and add that to like the trivia section of like, Greta Gerwig wears a shirt in this scene because of a young man that was wearing Hawaiian shirts. You've got to get that one's got to go up near the top.
No. It was honestly just so nice that it even happened. I was like, it could have been a coincidence, but like, I just thought it was so nice of her to even mention it. I was like, that's so sick. But she was such an amazing person to be around because she just took me around set and introduced me to everyone and like, made me feel like I was a part of this bigger thing. And I feel like rarely do PAs ever get that experience to be introduced to this world in such a welcoming way. It's very hard. I mean, I've been an additional PA recently, and it's hard to see people get shut down and, you know, basically treated horribly, you know. People have to have tough skin to get through those days, and rarely do you, most of the time you have to be the one to open yourself up to the crew rather than someone showing you around.
Your experience and something, how you describe Mike Mills reminds me of a quote that Greta Gerwig wrote. Like, there's this lovely like 20th century women like screenplay book, and Gerwig writes an introduction, and when she talks about Mike Mills, and I think it echoes exactly what you've said, whereas like Mike treats everyone who works on the films, from actors to PAs, and that's you, to boom operators, to craft services, to accountants, as filmmakers. Each one of us, in telling our own story in our own way, each has a right to the authorship, which I really like, because that essentially credits the role you did, even as an unpaid PA and so on. He views someone like yourself as a filmmaker and a contributor in a significant way.
And the stories he writes are so relatable. Like, it kind of makes me emotional hearing that, because in a weird way, you do feel this authorship to this greater thing that you're a part of, because once you read the script, you see yourself in it so clearly. I remember seeing myself in Lucas Jade Zunman, who played the son in the movie, and we connected on set a couple times, and we were talking about the script and just the relatability of having that type of relationship with your mom, where, you know, there's this line in 20th Century Woman when Annette Bening tells Greta Gerwig, she's like, you're going to be able to see my son out in the world. I'll never get to see him that way, you know? And that's such a, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, of course, but, you know, to have, to be aware of the fact that, you know, your family members won't always get to know who you are out in the world is such a universal message. And all of us, everyone on set, could kind of, every day we were shooting, we felt this like beautiful connection to all the characters and all of the things that we were putting in place, honestly. And I was doing such a small thing, but being able to observe and watch the story play out and have the script on me at all times and kind of just like follow along like it's a little treasure map. It was such a I definitely am so influenced by him as a filmmaker, and I truly am so grateful to how specific his stories are, because I'm reminded after that, being a part of that film, you know. And I think Greta Gerwig, especially after 20th Century Woman, she had more drive to direct herself and write her own stuff, because I remember seeing another interview she was saying where Mike was reminding her that the specific is more universal than anything else. You know, the things that are so close to you are the things you need to be writing about. You can't be writing about what everyone else needs you to write about. The more specific, the more universal. Always.
We've got this 20th Century Women impact to thank for everyone being so excited for her Barbie movie now next year, clearly.
Yeah, well, and like that's a whole thing, and like I'm proud of her for that. Like, you know, she'll bring her own originality to that.
Yeah, I think everyone, like in a lot of people's hands, if they heard a Barbie movie, fucking hell, like not interested in that. But then everyone has that Greta Gerwig where it's like, interesting. That I almost have that like Vince McMahon style gif in my head of like just in responding like, yeah, I'm interested. That everyone seems to be all on board for this movie that in any other hands it wouldn't be excited for people, I think.
You know, Noah Baumbach was attached to the script in the beginning.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I was like, that is so cool. I was like, what is this? Is this like a whole new...
I don't know what to expect from that movie, but I am all in on it in 2023. Like we'll trade notes on our reaction to it.
Yeah. We'll have a check-in. Yeah.
You got to walk around the set and see different roles, from like actors to performers to costumers, and obviously your career has been defined by covering many different roles and purposes. Did having that kind of freedom to almost explore, sort of inspire you to kind of spread your wings in that respect?
I knew I always wanted to act. And I had shared a manager with my father up until when I had graduated, I started getting represented by my dad's manager at the time, and I wasn't being sent out a lot. Like it was just like here or there. And then my dad left that manager. I stayed with her for a couple of months, and then ended up leaving her as well. And then as soon as the pandemic hit, I didn't have a manager whatsoever. And I just recently signed with somebody for acting and for writing, Iris Grossman at Echo Lake Entertainment. And throughout that whole time, though, like even now, it's like I've realized the importance of my role in getting myself out there, because a manager is an amazing thing to have, and I'm so grateful to have it. But a manager is not like an agent, where an agent's always sending you out for things. A manager is going to help guide you through the ups and downs. And I'm grateful that I got to learn that when I was just graduating high school with my first manager. And I just was making my own stuff. And I have this production collective that I work with. I mean, it's one that I founded with my friends, called the Friendly Strangers Production Collective, and we just help each other make each other's stuff, and we put on events and find ways to celebrate each other in small but powerful ways. And I recently just feel like now more than ever, having that production experience is so essential to knowing how to relate to your community and be a part of your community in such a powerful way. I know so many actors that haven't worked production jobs that just assume everything will be done around them and not realize that there's this greater machine working around them. And that's hard to, jump in on, but there's a lot of actors that have had that experience, and you see a clear difference. And it's not like a better or worse thing, but it's just like, it's a different awareness. You see that with people who also find themselves multitasking, writing, directing. They have a deeper appreciation for the crew in general, and for the time that's being spent to make all the things that you're making.
One final thing on 20th Century Women. When did you get to see it for the kind of first time, and what was your reaction?
It's so funny that you asked that. I never thought about the first time that I saw it. I remember it was like one of the few times that I'd seen it was at that screening that I was telling you about at the silent movie theater. That was like maybe the second or third time I'd seen it. But the first time I saw it, I think I didn't even see it in a movie theater. I think I saw it at home on a DVD, or I saw it on a screener. Yeah, I saw it on a screener.
There you go. That's the proper Hollywood way to
literally
experience a film like that. With your name plastered over the middle of it, where you can barely make out a thing, like this beautiful Santa Barbara County, like captured on screen, and your name is just right in the middle in like size 16 font.
Yeah, and the funniest part is, like, I remember it didn't have a long theater life. Like, it was a very limited engagement. I was at a couple Lemleys in LA, and I was house sitting, and the person I was house sitting for had the screener, and I watched it on their TV, and the first thing I wanted to know was if I was in the credits. And it was so cool. And it was like, I don't know, it was just such I cried. And it was, what was beautiful was that getting to read the script after we were done and realizing how close I was to it compared to when you're working on it, you're not looking at the script as much, I guess. The hours are so insane that you're not paying attention as much to what's happening. But when you go back and reflect, I had such a visceral connection to what Mike was portraying, and the fact that when he was growing up, he was going through a lot, and the world was going through a lot. And I felt that same way when Trump was elected too. Like, I was like so lost. And it was, or when it was around when we were shooting it when Trump was running for the election. And we all had this like disbelief and like this, it felt like a very chaotic time when we were making it. And it also felt like we had lost a leader that was helping guide us. And that speech with President
Jimmy Carter.
Carter, yeah. So thank you, Jimmy Carter. That speech just reminded me of how little truth that we can say to our country in times of desperation. Like, it's insane, especially in the US. Like, and it's different around the world, but like, Jimmy Carter was one of the only presidents that really wanted to speak the truth and like wake people up from the trance that we were all in, of consumerism, of everything, of capitalism, and now we're all trying to pretend like romanticizing capitalism is a good thing, because like that's just the way that people have put it out there. The movie was just reminding me how much room for growth there is, because he kept saying it every day on set that not much has changed. You know what I mean? The world is still moving at such a glacial pace, and I don't know, that's such a prevalent, and it's always going to be a timeless theme.
One of the things that was interesting about 20th Century Women, kind of looking back, is like it was one of these rare, like it was a co-collaboration between like Annapurna and A24, and Annapurna has kind of faced some sort of challenges in the kind of past years, but it seems like it's on the road to recovery. What's been your kind of impression of like Annapurna these kind of past few years as they've kind of faced some challenges post 20th Century Women?
I don't know. I'm glad that I'm glad that they've taken the risk to work on a film like that, because it's not their average blockbuster, whatever that would make them more money. Obviously I know they're not a blockbuster production company, but they're they made Miranda July's most recent film as well, and I'm like, I like the risks that they take, so I definitely hope the best.
And I suppose now we can kind of dive into Ramy. But so when did you first hear about kind of Ramy, and how did you get involved in it?
I met Ramy when I was in high school. He had met my dad through the Arab Comedy Festival. And he had come over our house on Christmas Eve one year when I was before I graduated high school. And I met him when he was doing this Nickelodeon show. And yeah, and so I just knew him as like a family friend. Like, he came to my sister's graduation, and then I was going to the new school in New York, and my father was in town for a premiere for a movie, and he was telling me that he was shooting a pilot presentation for Ramy, and that it was with A24. My father didn't really know of A24 that much at the time. Like, he knew the company, but it wasn't like everyone wasn't freaking out about it, I guess, But when I hear A24, even back then, even in like 2017, I was like, oh my God, that's insane. Like, I was like, I need to see this pilot. And knowing that, we're in touch with Ramy and that it was his project, I asked asked if I could see the pilot, and Ramy texted my dad and gave me access to the editing suite, which I ended up doing film drop for the next 2 years after that. But I got to sit down in the editing suite and watch the pilot on a Vimeo link with my father in it as the father. And then I remember I was still at school at that time, and then I went back home, and I was thinking about dropping out of school. It was really expensive, and I was going to see a lot of stand-up, and I ran into Ramy, and I asked him if they were still working on the show, and he was like, "Oh, we're doing a writer's room right now." And I asked Ramy straight up at the stand-up show, I was like, "Hey, can I shadow or like be an assistant to you guys in the writer's room, and I'll get groceries or whatever, you know? I'd love to observe." And he put me in touch with a now friend of mine, Adil Kamal, who was already a writer's assistant in the room. And Adil ended up casting me in his first short film. And we were already about to be connected before he'd even put me into this writer's room. Which was such a crazy, like, you know, the universe is, you know, so small, you know, moment. And yeah, so I got to like be a like shadow for the last like 3 or 4 weeks of the writer's room. And I got to like basically watch them reconfigure the structure of the whole season. And I got to see how beautifully relaxed it can be at certain points, seeing a writer's room just become writers having conversations about their experiences and sharing moments. You know, there was like a Sufi sheikh that came in one day, and he led like a meditation, like a spiritual meditation that was for the whole writer's room. And we're all sitting in a circle doing this chant. And it was so beautifully magnetic in the room. And we all kind of felt like we were going to pass out at the same time. And it was like such a beautiful, you know, there were so many beautiful moments that he created in that room. And that kind of, yeah, that's how I met him that way. So, and I'm lucky to have been able to been in that writer's room. And then as soon as that finished, I just decided I'm dropping out of school. I asked him if I could work on set. He let me work on set, and I found myself working in between different departments. I worked in the art department for a while doing pre-production, and then I started working on set as a PA. In the art department, I was like designing the Muslim Tinder profiles.
Oh my God. I'd love to know. I can only imagine the research that goes into doing something like that.
I felt so not qualified, even though I'm an Arab myself. I'm a very Americanized Arab, so I was doing a lot of catching up, and I was corrected when I needed to be. But you know, it was just so, it was a learning curve, you know, and that was the thing. It was like, at the time, it was also very interesting and beautiful thing is like, you know, not everyone in the writer's room was Arab the first season, or not everyone on the crew was Arab, but that was such a beautiful opportunity for outsiders to have an inside approach and be able to be experts on our culture. And like, I think that's where the show is strongest, is in how it's created. You know, we had a production designer who's not at all from the Middle East, who ended up designing a mosque and turning a church into a mosque. And I'm like, the whole team, you know what I mean? And it's such a beautiful thing to see happen. You know, obviously there's people that are cross-referencing things, of course, but you know, to see the research that goes into it. You know, I was working the art department the second season when they were making the mosque, and I was helping them find images that would be helpful and stuff like that, and you know, print, you know, copying images that could be used as reference. And the amount of work that they put into it was just so beautiful, and I'm so grateful to know that whole art department. They're truly brilliant and such carefully respectful artists that respect every culture they approach whenever they're working. Like, it's insane.
For you, what is like a typical day like on set in your kind of your role? What's it like for you?
Well, this last I worked on this last season as an additional PA, just because I came back to New York mainly to act, and I wanted to still have FaceTime with my friends that I knew. There were people that have been there since the first season, and I wanted to be around the producers and my friends who are in the cast, like Dave and May and Steve. Uh, so I was lucky that I'm still friends with the key PAs and the second ADs, and they brought me on. But the first and the second season, my day-to-days were different. I chose to work pre-production because I wanted to learn from that for both seasons. So I found myself driving around, running errands for the art department, going on location scouts. I was on the location scout for the Mia Khalifa episode where we're in that big mansion, which I did not know was haunted. I have a crazy ghost story from that. But yeah, no, it was just such a, we found out that mansion was owned by the guy who the Monopoly game is based on. So I don't know who, I forget, but that guy, and that guy would rent out that house, that mansion, to celebrities on the West Coast that were making their films in New York. So Charlie Chaplin has like a room devoted to him because he would vacation in that house a lot, and so many different actors and actresses that would come by. But yeah, it was. We found ourselves. I found myself just like coming up with a lot of names for the art department. Whenever it would be like we'd have to clear a lot of names for whether it be coffee shops or just the Sufi Center. I mean, I'm even wearing the hat right now. The A24 put out this hat that says North Jersey, and I remember literally coming up with 40 names for a Sufi Center because we had to come up with something that was like hip, and we were all at the same time. We were like, Mahershala wouldn't, he wouldn't shorten a Sufi Center name just because it wouldn't just be called Sufi, but like, but we, I remember this was like one of the first suggestions I came up with because we were all like, oh, it just has to be Sufi Center of this part of Jersey. Like that's the easiest way to do it because there can't be another Sufi Center like that. And there were so many Sufi centers like that.
It's brilliant. And one of the things, like when I think of kind of Ramy, like I just adore like an insight into a world that I know very little about. And you spoke about some of the roles, for example, that your father played. We're so used to those kind of roles, in the past few years, and then something like Ramy comes along and completely recontextualizes what and it gives you like a full insight into that kind of world. It seems very much important to clearly Ramy that like behind the scenes, in front of the camera, like that representation is so important. What's it like to kind of, as him, is he quite like a leader, in your eyes, like on set and perhaps in a wider sense as well?
Yeah, I think he sets a beautiful tone for everyone. I mean, he's more welcoming than anybody I've ever seen. You know what I mean? I see him on set talking to every crew member. If he sees a new person on set, he goes up to them and says hi. And there's this shared respect that you feel on set every day you're on a set like that. Like the hours may be long sometimes, but the people that you're spending it with are undeniably like you love them. You know what I mean? And it's he sets that tone really well, and he has set that tone since the beginning. But yeah, I think what's beautiful is that there's also just like such a shorthand he has with everyone that he's working with and the people that he's brought back over the seasons. Crew-wise, you like Claudio, our cinematographer, who was amazing and like one of my favorite cinematographers. He was a camera operator the first season, camera A or something like that. And now second season he became a cinematographer, and now he came back as a cinematographer. And it's such a it's so cool to see how Ramy like helps people go up the ranks in that way. Like Adil Kamal, who brought me into the writer's room when he was an assistant, he was a first team production assistant the first season. Then he found himself writing for the second season and associate producing for the second season. And now he's an executive producer the third season. And he's, you know, doing so many other things. And it's amazing to see that, you know, he brings people up and helps them get to these different places. If I hadn't gone back, you know, to be on set this last season, I wouldn't have gotten the Sundance thing. I met these directors and writers the first season of the show, and I ended up running into them on set this season, and they reached out to me because they were able to have some FaceTime with me on set, and it was such a, you know, just that environment is so magnetic, and I'm grateful to have spent the last 3 years working with them, because it's such a close community that I will never, I will always hold dear.
That's incredible. And you mentioned like you've done behind the scenes, but you've also appeared in front of the camera. Can you tell people a little bit about your sort of your role in Ramy and what to look out for?
Yeah, I gotta send you a picture. Because yeah, I was a White Castle cashier the first season of Ramy. It's so funny because I wish, like, I'm gonna try. I want to audition for more on the show, but I feel like it's just so known. Like, all my friends know that I was a White Castle cashier, that even if I do audition, they'll be like, "Oh no, but you were already there." Like, like there's no changing that I was there.
Yeah, there'll be someone like nitpicker going, "How is this guy gone like that?" You know, there's always someone.
But subconsciously, you know what I did? I grew out my whole. I've never had a before, but I really disguised myself, where I just like put a whole beard on me, had a hat on, and you cut to me for like 2 seconds, and it's beautiful. And that whole scene was just such a pleasure to do. To work with Hiam Abbas and have her yell at both of us was such a. I could not ask for anything more. It was such an iconic moment.
She's one of the underrated stars in my eyes of that show, and I love her.
And my other White Castle cashier, her name is escaping me. I'm so sorry. But she ended up being on And Just Like That. She ended up playing one of the daughters on And Just Like That. She was also in the animation Over the Moon. Yeah, she's an amazing actress. And yeah, no, I auditioned for that. I was working as a PA one day, and my manager at the time was like, "Hey, do you want to audition for this role on Ramy as a White Castle cashier?" And I was like, "Hell yeah." He was like, "You can only go on Wednesday." And I was like, "I'm working Wednesday. Like, what do I ended up having to ask my key PA I told him I had an audition for the show. And I was like, "I'm not trying to tell anyone that I'm auditioning for the show, but can I leave for lunch? Because I know we have an hour lunch, and I'll go to the city and come right back." And he's like, "Yeah, don't worry about it. I'll cover you. Like, no one will know that you're gone." And I'm like, sick. So I literally run to the audition with my walkie still on. I'm the type of PA that doesn't have my own surveillance. Like, I have the McDonald's headset that goes, and I show up there with my headset on, and I forget to take it off before, and I literally do the first take with the headset on, and it looks like I work at a White Castle already, so it's fine.
And someone's thinking, why is this guy needing his lines fed to him? It's just like a small role.
Exactly. No, it was too funny, and I had met the casting director before, because I was talking to her through email about casting suggestions for other people on the show that they needed. Like, I was giving her suggestions for people to play Osama bin Laden, and And like,
I'm sure they were flattered. Whoever you put forward for that were like, I can't believe you thought of me specifically for that.
I put some people that would be the dead version of Osama bin Laden if he was. I'm realizing Osama bin Laden was young when he was younger when he passed. But yeah. Anyways, but yeah, I was lucky to have some sort of connection with her, and we started talking, and she let me take the headset off, and we did the audition, and I literally get back to set, and no one knows that I left, and Ramy walks past me, and I'm like removing cones from the street because we just come back from lunch, and he comes up to me, he's like, "Hey, how did you get here?" And I was looking at his iPad, and it was like a Dropbox app where my audition was right there in front of him. And I was like, I just went on lunch break. I told the key, and he laughed and like was like, "You got it. Don't worry about it." And that job paid for 2 months of rent for me. It was amazing. I did not expect to get paid as much money as I did for that.
Yeah, no wonder you want to get more roles in this show. I can see right through you right now.
You see, yeah, it's all for the money, man. Yeah. It was literally like 2 lines, and I got paid more than honestly most featured players get. And I'm like, how? Why are the budgets like this? This makes no sense. But I respect it, and I'm grateful.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And you've obviously touched on it. Ramy season 3 started. Like, I wouldn't even dare ask you anything about the plot because, like, I'm just desperate to see it. How is it kind of going on set so far for season 3?
Well, we wrapped. So at the end of the day, I just think that yeah, it was a great experience. I'm really grateful to have been there. I wasn't yeah. And yeah, the only thing that you guys have though in like Variety put out was Bella Hadid is in the season.
Okay, oh, that'd be great.
They don't say in what capacity, and I won't tell you, but that is dope, and she's dope, and she's amazing. She's a nice person.
It feels like it's been years since that season 2 finale, and I'm still wincing and cringing in my seat at that final few scenes. I can't wait to see where it goes next.
It's so exciting. No, it's gonna be great. But yeah, no, I honestly I think I'm grateful. I think that the show is such a vehicle that's helping so many other people get their own shows. To see Steve getting his own show.
Yeah, so I saw like, and they're doing a we together. Ramy and Steve we had Steve on a few years ago. God, it feels like a lifetime. We had him on. He was like, "Oh, I'm going to maybe be doing this show with Ramy," and like he kind of teased a little bit about it. And then like a year later, like reading about it officially becoming a thing, which sounds fantastic.
Yeah, Steve, Ramy, and John Braylaw, who did Astronomy Club. All 3 amazing people. Like, and then Judd Apatow producing. Like, it's going to be such a great show. I think, yeah, that's a great show. And Mo Amer has his own show coming out. He and Ramy worked on it together, and that's set in Houston. And it's one of the first shows in the U.S. that's depicting a Palestinian family, which is beautiful. And then, so many other people are getting, people are developing their own shows. There's, and I think it's brought so much acceptance to our community. And I think a lot of people sometimes think, oh, we shouldn't put this much weight on it, but it is, you know what I mean? We're in such a backward time right now that it's taking this long. It took this long for a show like this to come out. Like, of course, Ramy's not going to be the first person, but he is right now. But at the end of the day, it's like people like Ramy recognize the people that came before him. Most people that become the first don't, And I respect that of Ramy. Like he he's put on everyone that he's worked with before, like Laith Zuaiter, he worked with in the Arab Comedy Festival. And, Laith Zuaiter was dealing with a lot of the same shit my dad had to deal with. And in terms of, casting stereotypes and all these different struggles within the community. And I think Ramy is a shining example of someone who pays tribute to those who came before him and includes them in the things that he's gonna continue doing in the future.
And it feels like listening to you and your stories, where it's like he's raising up other people to go on and make their projects that might be telling similar stories or stories from their personal perspective that might have not been represented, by giving people some of the hardest things that you can do in the industry of like opportunities in art production, starring roles. Even as you say, like when he puts someone in a role, that's someone's paycheck covering rent, that gives them the opportunity to go, I can breathe a bit, I can maybe do more and be out there and so on. And it's all those little kind of almost butterfly effects of this one show that we'll continue to see for years to come, I hope.
It's so true. I mean, he made me SAG eligible, and I'm grateful for that. But I will not join SAG until I have money to pay for it. So, but I'm grateful to be eligible. That's definitely a ripple effect in a good way.
It's interesting when you compare Ramy and 20th Century Women, both very different tales, on their face, but kind of despite being set on like even the opposite coasts, both are these kind of projects brought to life by kind of sons that pay tribute to their kind of personal family experiences and trials that they've done. They're a really interesting kind of pair to compare to each other, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's what I was so grateful to see in the writer's room for Ramy was Ramy sharing the importance of how his own specificity was going to be the thing that made the show universal. Like, it's a show about his life. It's not a show trying to represent everyone. It's a show that's representing his experience with his faith and his identity and his complications with his identity. And that was something I feel like growing up and seeing everyone trying to, be a representative of their culture, people don't realize they can't speak for everyone. You have to speak specifically from your own experience. You have to speak to that so that you can allow and bring other people to speak from their experiences and represent the people that you're not covering, And I think that's such a beautiful thing that he always keeps in mind, is that it's his story. It's very specific to him. And that's the same thing for Mike, and the same thing for so many directors that are working with A24.
It almost sounds like you've got a similar attitude yourself. Like you go back to that collective that you had, that it sounds like a similar attitude on Ramy of like, you all kind of raise each other up, help each other out. You're not just helping out in one department, you're in another. It's like that's an amazing kind of thing that's, seems to be almost represented in all of the different sets that you've been involved in so far.
I really appreciate that, man. Yeah, no, and I'm grateful to have had a shining example like A24 to show me that is possible on, like, I know it's weird to like thank A24 as like a company, but like you can see how A24 has this touch in who they hire, and like they try to bring people that have a good friendly energy onto set, and like they bring together friends, and it feels like you're going to high school, like, and it's not cliquey or anything, but it feels like you're around family in so many ways. And it's I think that's it's hard to find that, and also it's also hard to find people that are that kind and that talented too. I mean, not hard, but I think it's hard to come upon people that lead with a positive attitude. You know what I mean? And now it's becoming it's becoming a requirement in the industry to lead with your positive attitude, because no one wants to work in that kind of environment anymore. And I think the only reason why I ever even wanted to create or continue creating a collective of people that help each other, and like we essentially at some point will call ourselves a production company, but only until we have the money to do so. But the only reason why I wanted to do that was because I had a bad experience on set a couple of times. I've had a couple of bad experiences, and I find myself, I remind myself of those experiences so many times because I'm reminded of how easy it is to ignore what people need on set, you know, and not check, and when not checking in and not having communication on set, how that can be like flipping over a set of dominoes, and like so many things can fall out of place when you're not paying attention to the things that are needed of you as a producer, as an actor. You know, there's so many things that the crew will need of you as an actor. You're not this separate entity, you know. And yeah, and I think especially in this renaissance that we're in, where everyone's multitasking and finding different ways to engage themselves artistically, we forget that in order to do that, you have to be in touch with every department and every person that's working for you.
And that's that true best independent spirit, isn't it? You know, like, you know, the amount of art that gets born out of that adversity, like lack of budget, you know, you think of like almost, it's crazy to compare the two almost, but like you think of that like recent Everything Everywhere at Once, 20 million, like what they did with that compared to a Doctor Strange with all the money, like a huge conglomerate around it, and you're like, that is a department where everyone really pooled their resources in so many different ways.
Literally. And I'm such a fan of the Daniels. Like, they are the only directors I'd be starstruck by because of the community that they create around their films, the stories I've heard. I met Daniel Schechter, or I don't think that's his last name, Daniel Scheinhardt. Yeah. At a movie theater after Swiss Army Man came out. And I was on my way to see it, and he was just the sweetest guy. And I truly think that directors that lead with that attitude put out some of the most enjoyable work possible, because you can see the enjoyment that the actors are having on set, and you can see the enjoyment that's put into the production and the design that's behind everything that's around it. Like, the stress doesn't create good art. Like, no one's like thinking about how crazy that experience was. I mean, some people do, I guess, because sometimes you have to be stressed. You know, that there are such demanding situations in certain films.
Stress can be good as well. It can be something that provokes something in you and excitement. But I suppose when you have, as you say, that support network in place, you know, you don't feel like alone, and you know that you can rely on other people when you're perhaps having those stressful days.
Exactly. You can have a balance. You can have a stressful day, but it matters most who you surround yourself with.
Yeah. You mentioned some of your A24 highlights. Are there any sort of other like films and shows that they've worked on that you've enjoyed?
I have to say the Carmichael Show is one of my favorites, because that's the first, I think, if I'm not mistaken, it's the first TV show they produced. And they did it with NBC. It was Gerard Carmichael created it with Ari Catcher and another friend of theirs. I forget their name. And yeah, like Lil Rel Howery is introduced there. Tiffany Haddish was introduced there. It felt like one of the last great sitcoms. And I'm glad A24 was a part of that, you know, because I think so many sitcoms don't take the risks that Gerard Carmichael was setting out there. Because those were conversations you weren't even having on sitcoms before then, you know? The sitcom he created was like an anti-sitcom. It was like a sitcom that brought up really hard questions. And, you know, you kind of laugh through them because of the format of the show. And there's an audience and everyone's laughing and it's uncomfortable. But that's the core root of the type of stuff I feel like A24 really does well, is giving artists the agency to get that uncomfortable with their audiences and really dig under the surfaces of what real conversations we want to have. I'm grateful to have seen Ramy have that agency as a creator just out the gate. You know what I mean? Like out the gate, he's making a show with an episode about 9/11, and no one can tell him what to do. And obviously you're getting notes no matter what, but at the end of the day, it's like you're going to be the best person to tell your own story. And the fact that A24 creates that space is the reason why we hold it to such high regard, is because they are an artist's platform. They are not trying to mess with the artist's vision. They want to support artists in any way they can. And the Carmichael Show is one of those reminders to me, because that was also like made around when they first started doing stuff. So like because they were created in 2012, I think. And Carmichael Show came out like 2014, 2015. And yeah, just to see them take that kind of risk so early on. Like, I don't know if they do that now. They might, obviously, but because that was like one of the first things they did. But to see that they set that kind of precedent with Carmichael Show and was like, oh, we're not going to try to do whatever you expect us to do. We're going to try to support our artists and let them do what they want to do. Some people will say it's a great show. Some people will say it's not a great show. But the Carmichael Show to me is like a beautiful experiment, you know?
And I've got to say, this is the first time we've asked many people that question. That's the first time the Carmichael Show has gotten answered. So you've immediately set yourself out from the pack.
Nice. I hope he hears it.
In terms of like your own work, what are you kind of working on at the moment with yourself or with your kind of the team around you? What are you working on at the moment? And maybe for those that are keen to check out some of your work, you know, where can kind of people find it?
Yeah. So the short that I was in, I shot a short in Jordan in 2019, and now it's doing a festival run. It's called Lovesick in the West Bank. And it was playing in New York just recently, and then it was playing all around. There's going to be a link for that at some point, but I don't have that. You can follow me on Instagram. I really more recently have been using Instagram to create community there and find ways to collaborate and meeting people that way. I have an Instagram for the production collective I work with. It's at The Friendly Strangers. But yeah, for me right now, it's like I'm writing my own show. I have a couple of shows I'm writing. That honestly, I want to talk to you about on the side more so.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
Yeah. But they're more so, their stories, you know, definitely relating around this theme of lost identity, you know. I grew up in New York, as I was saying earlier, like I moved to New York a year after 9/11, and obviously, as a kid, I was very young. I was like 5 or 6. I wasn't acknowledging everything that was happening around me. My parents definitely felt way more than I did in terms of racism or just, you know, looks. If someone heard that we were Arab or whatever. Like my dad would grow out a beard for a play, and our neighbors would ask my mom, is everything okay in the house? Like, you know, and it would just be like this weird dialogue. And I was so separated from that in so many ways. And my mom and my parents protected me from that. And through protecting me from that, I kind of found myself pushing down my culture and not embracing it as much as a kid because it wasn't cool. You know, early 2000s, we were all trying to be white, you know? It wasn't like I wanted straight hair, you know, and it was such a different time. And I'm so grateful that these kids now in today's day and age, they get to embrace themselves in school. They don't get to get made fun of by their lunches in school. Like, you know, I remember bringing za'atar bread to school at lunch, and everyone would be like, Laith, why'd you bring your toilet paper to school? And I'm like, now you're eating za'atar on every single avocado toast you get. You know, and it's such a, we truly, I don't know how old you are. I'm 25.
I'm
like
35.
Got you. Well, around the same, like, you know, around the same sphere of like, just this, we're seeing this transition of general acceptance now, and everyone is, I mean, I know it's very different in the UK, but in the US, we've taken so long to accept each other, and things haven't been normalized only until recently. Like, there's so many things that should have been normalized like 10 years ago.
Yeah. What do you think is normalizing it? Is it kind of, in addition to things like you have Ramy and figures out there, and whether it's politics and the arts, you know, out there, you know, what's kind of normalizing it to an extent, do you think?
I mean, yeah, I guess the word normalizing is a little loaded. I don't mean to say that anything has to be normalized, because nothing could be normalized for any for anyone's perspective. Like obviously normal is subjective, and no one can say what is normal.
I suppose it's that acceptance, isn't it, more than normalized, of like, it's accepted. Of course, like, why wouldn't it be X? Or exactly. Why wouldn't you behave that way, or bring that for your lunch, or behave in that way?
But at the end of the day, that's the way our society works, is that we do use these words, and we do say normalize, because we end up making the things that we want to normalize palatable to a white lens, no matter what. And this is why there's a transition. Is like, we're getting out of that space of like wanting to make ourselves palatable and coming to the table unapologetically.
Yeah, your shows and all that matter. Like I mentioned, like when my friend Oase came on the show, he's like, I didn't see people like me on TV shows, movies. And then, you know, people will see that and understand me a little better. It's not all just on me to explain myself. It's like, you know, these things can be a visual tool for kind of, you know, boosting that kind of acceptance, I guess. And, you know, I think back to even the shows I watched, I wasn't seeing that type of culture represented in anything other than negative cliches and stereotypes, even long before 9/11. And then following it, you know, I always think of an actor I really liked. I'm a huge Star Trek fan, Alexander Siddig, and he was like, you know, I did Star Trek and I did stuff on the side. And then when 9/11 came along, everyone wanted to cast me, but it was always in very particular kind of roles. And it seems we've kind of cycled now past that, and it's taken nearly 2 decades to be now. It's now the average Joe on the street in New Jersey or other places, as opposed to these larger than life big figures out there, I think.
Or these like bigger stereotypes. Like even when it gets to a story like Ramy is a very specific story. It's a beautiful story, but that, I think a lot of producers think, oh, Ramy's representing the whole community. So a lot of producers who aren't Arab don't realize, or even aren't Muslim, and I'm not Muslim myself, but these producers who aren't at all think that, oh, we just need another story like his to fill this quota. And at the end of the day, the thing that gets more people on board is creating more nuanced stories. My story specifically, I'm someone who was ashamed of my culture, and that's a perspective worth diving into, rather than only being somebody who has to embrace his culture for his art form. You know, I think that's an expectation I also held on myself for a while, not being a practicing Muslim, and also not being someone who is so attached to, I wasn't so attached to my culture in high school growing up, but after high school, it was a different experience. And I feel a lot of shame that I never embraced myself that way in high school. And there's this different shame that comes at me as an adult, you know, being on set for something like Ramy. Like, it's not like it's all my own projections, but I feel myself being so whitewashed. And it was also my own doing, in the sense that I allowed this peer pressure to get the best of me, and allow this outside lens to affect the way I saw myself. And now I'm becoming more accepted with not needing to claim a community that I'm not necessarily a part of. Like I am not Muslim. So I don't claim that I'm Muslim, or I don't apply to, like, Muslim scholarships, because I'm like, I have a very specific story. If anything, I learned that from Ramy. Is like, the more specific you are, the better off you are in terms of telling your story, and your story being seen as universal. Don't try to be something you're not. And that's the thing, is like, most people try to fit into the box that everyone has created for you. My father found himself in that place of having to fit into the box created by these big executives, Law and Order, doing all these different things. And I remember working in that writer's room and realizing, like, we don't need to fit into any more boxes. We can create our own now. And it's exciting that's, I guess, the majority of what I'm working on is stories that revolve around that idea of accepting your identity, and then also realizing how small the world is.
I'm curious about the whitewashing, for example. As much as things are now, there's perhaps more representation in front of the camera and behind the camera. Is that pathway for someone like yourself with your experience? Is there a clear pathway to getting your own work out there, or is there still perhaps a long way to go?
I think I'm very lucky to say there's somewhat of a clear pathway, but it's not clear in the sense that there's no obstacles, but that the door's open, and it's not. I'm less afraid to tell my story. I was really afraid to tell certain stories that I'm writing right now, and that's why I won't mention them. It's just because I would obviously tell you off camera, I feel you're a very great person to talk to. But it's just that I have this conversation with myself of, what kind of risks do I want to take right out the gate, and what kind of risks do I want to wait for? And becoming aware of my identity, and having all of these different ideas that I want to create, that I believe serve a greater purpose than just being a film. Like, I want my work to serve greater purposes, and find ways to allocate money from these productions in order to help communities that I'm talking about in certain projects, especially some projects that I'm writing that are based in Palestine.
And especially in America, if to jump in, it seems like I see what you post on Instagram, for example, and like I 100% agree with it. But then there's always this weird disconnect in America when it comes to things like Palestine, where it doesn't feel like they get it or understand, and I feel like they're in a different reality to what we should all be in terms of that conflict, for example.
Yeah, and the only people that are more open to discovering the Palestinian narrative is A24. They are producing Mo Amer's show about about his Palestinian family growing up in Houston. And yeah, it's like I get faith from those types of decisions being made. I see way more interest, obviously, from UK. UK has, I think, some of the most advanced TV that I've seen. My father doing Baghdad Central for Channel 4 was insane to me.
Channel 4 is the perfect home for the show that you're describing right now. And my friend Awais that I'm talking about, he's now started working at Channel 4. And like, that is someone that is in that world that saw representation in Ramy, and now he is working in TV. He has his foot in the door in his dream job now.
It's truly amazing to see the risks you guys are able to take, because in a lot of ways, there's a different awareness that you guys have compared to us. We're still a very young country, and we still want to live in our lives, and we don't want to accept the fact that we may be wrong. But the fact that something like Baghdad Central, where both the US and the British are the villains in the show, I mean, come on, like, that's crazy. And I got to see Corey Stoll at a play in LA recently. He's a mutual friend of mine. We have mutual friends with this playwright named Mona Mansour, who made this play called the Vagrant Trilogy. And it's based in Palestine. And he was outside at intermission, and I talked to him about it. And we were just talking about how much reverence we have for the production companies based in the UK because of the risks you guys are able to take, and the types of projects that are being prioritized is what it is. In the US, we're prioritizing, shows that are a lot of, it's just a lot of romanticizing things. I feel like there's a lot less shows trying to uncover the truth through what I see it as, like, documentary narrative. I see, like, shows like Baghdad Central, or like, the original Euphoria was a show that I felt like was a documentary narrative, in the sense that that was a show, it was an Israeli show. I haven't seen it fully. I only saw the pilot, but it was an interesting concept in the sense that that was a show based around the drug trade within high schools in Israel and between Palestinians and Israelis. And, like, that's a whole different, observation of society than Euphoria, because Euphoria is in this other sphere of it being current, but also in the past.
Yeah. And it feels like America still has perhaps what was that post 9/11 attitude almost towards, like, that conflict where it's like good, bad, America unwavering in its support of certain, groups. And you're like, really? Like, that is not the reality or the story. And it distorts things, and it makes people that are advocating for what's going on in Palestine, trying to tell those stories, those people, it immediately demonizes them. And, it makes it feels like, well, there's got to be something that breaks out to tell their story.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, like, Euphoria is a great story. I love a lot of the show. Like, the majority of the show is a very beautifully made show. And I think that the people that have been a part of it are amazing, and the actors are amazing. It's just, I wish there were different priorities. Like, there's other shows I can even think of right now off the top of my head, but there's a lot of, like, busy work TV shows where you kind of just put it on and it just plays, and it's like goes on for 6 seasons, and it's not, a lot of Netflix shows are like that, I guess, and they find themselves getting canceled or whatever. And I'm like, why are we putting money into shows that we know are just kind of experiments, and not putting our money into shows that have been really well thought out and that are also trying to educate our audiences? Because I feel like the UK prioritizes that in such a different way than the US. Like, you guys really prioritize finding a way to create a balance and actually educate through your entertainment.
I think it's almost perhaps even the structure where you hear about it so much of, like, Netflix, Disney, all these things. It's like Paramount Plus, content. We need content. We need just to fill it, just chuck money at things. Whereas perhaps, like, with the way maybe the BBC and Channel 4 work here, is they're like publicly funded broadcasters. BBC, for example, they get their money through kind of you pay for the BBC each year. Channel 4 is publicly broadcasted. So there's almost that quality and quantity filter in there. I mean, there's rubbish on there, but, like, it's not something that's like, there's not that idea that you just need to chuck money at it to fill the schedule there. They've almost got decades of stuff within Channel 4 and longer with BBC to fill their content with, so they can kind of prioritize certain areas and talent. And I'm not a Doctor Who fan, but then you even just look at the casting that they're doing just now with that, it feels exciting. It's about representation, telling stories, and, you know, trying to probably right some wrongs that they've done over the years, and probably BBC a little bit more than Channel 4.
Yeah, even like a show like Man Like Mobeen, it came right before Ramy, and Ramy references that show all the time. Man Like Mobeen was it was the first Muslim TV show. It was yeah, it was like it came out literally a year before Ramy came out. And that's such a great show, and like I don't know, it's the proof is in the pudding that we need to follow, and we are following very closely the UK model of doing seasons now. If you've noticed, a lot of our shows are stopping at episodes. We're starting
and
to
that's
like
the quality control, isn't it? Where the people like that rave about the American Office, oh my god, I mean, it had some good seasons, but like the UK Office, it was 12 episodes and a Christmas special and it was done. Like the quality of that was so much higher, and you see that with Ramy, like quality control, just keep it short, you know, don't overstretch the writers, you know, that gone are the days of like 26 episode seasons where the quality was up and down, and, you know, god knows what it must have been like in those writers rooms in the 90s.
I mean, there was cocaine there, so no.
So I'm kind of curious, like, you know, when if you kind of follow in that pipeline, how long do you almost see it being? Like, do you have a goal in mind of like in 5 years, 2 years, that you see your kind of work hopefully make that breakthrough?
I'm reminded by my father and other friends of his that I've seen work through the industry over the last 10, 15 years, just growing up around that community, that it's not about it's about creating goals, but not creating a timeline. I have a lot of goals. I definitely I want to work in television. And I want to produce and write and create television and act in it and stuff. But I stop myself from expecting something to break through. You know, my father struggled for so long when I was growing up. He's been an actor for over 25 years now, or just about 25 years, and for so much of that time, he was just doing like small plays on the side, small guest stars, not even like maybe one guest star a year, you know. And you know, I saw my mom being someone who had to be the breadwinner at one point in the relationship, and like having to help support my dad's journey, and that seeing even when he struggled that much, he kind of kept doing it because he loved it so much. Like seeing that love, I'm reminded that I don't need to, and I feel like a lot of people in my generation find themselves creating a goal and expecting a due date for when it shows up, or when, you know, when the opportunity shows up to, you know, prove yourself essentially. And that date doesn't always come. It's about you creating opportunities to prove to yourself that you're still invested. You know, no one's going to tell you that you're amazing until you tell yourself that you're still invested and that you're still amazing and you still want to continue down this path. So for me, it's like I'm going to be doing this for the rest of my life in any way, shape, or form. I have less of a chip on my shoulder on working production or working other roles in this industry. Like I know a lot of actors that would be like, why are you PAing? Like I've had many actors tell me like, why are you PAing? Even a friend of mine that I put on to PAing asked me why I'm PAing. It's like, it seems as if I gave up on myself. And I'm like, no, like I know one of my favorite directors who I got lucky to work with recently in a writer's room. His first big break was directing Robin Williams in his first feature film. And as soon as he was done with that feature film, he went back to PAing. And he's still working in the industry. And it's, if you love it that much, you'll stay in it, you know?
And so many, like very few people in any profession really, you know, if they can make a career work and they can make things pay on one job, fantastic. But the amount of people, especially in this kind of society we've got now, are doing those kind of multiple jobs. And, you know, if you do some like PAing for a few months and then you work on something else and move in between, it sounds like an exciting kind of life, and I'm sure that you cross paths with different people, and you continue to grow that. It seems like as someone that used to work as a careers advisor, it seems like really good advice.
And at the end of the day, it's like it doesn't always have to be PAing, because PAing is the most grueling part. I think it's also the most degrading, but at the same time, it's like finding other facets to educate yourself with in the industry. Like I see so many PAs going to work in the art department, or then going to work in props, or working locations, which ends up bringing them up the pipeline to producing. Like if you're that invested, choose to go back to school by working lower income jobs. I don't know. I feel like people just distance themselves and they end up working jobs they hate just to supplement their dream. Whereas they can be on set having FaceTime with the people that will be casting them in the future.
Yeah. And I've heard so many, I've interviewed quite a lot of writers on TV and film, and the amount of people that were like, I was the production assistant writing the things on the board on a TV show, and then they went like, what's your pitch for an episode one day? And that's how it starts. Like the 90s was filled with stories like that, and it's something that's maybe been lost a little bit, in terms of pitches and stuff, but like that was a way to do it.
And if anything, now it's getting to be that way again. I feel that. I feel like I mean, I'm so lucky to have been in the chair to tell them what I was interested in doing. Like I told them I was interested in working for any department, and they put me in every department. They had me working with the post department and like doing all these different things. And I'm just grateful to, I think it's nice to see that on the horizon there's open working environments and people are interested in knowing what you want to bring to the table, or what you can bring to the table, in order to make this project a more enjoyable experience.
Well, it's been incredible to dive into that journey with you kind of today, and I'm hopeful in the future we'll have an excuse to get you back on again to discuss projects you're working on or writing, that those come to fruition. I'm really excited for you, and I think we could all learn a lot from your experiences and your attitude.
And I really appreciate just the interest, man. I really do appreciate this conversation in so many ways. It's a beautiful reminder to like take time to reflect on your work, no matter what position you're in. You even interviewed my friend Evangeline.
Oh yes, yeah.
I just think about these interviews for actors as well, and I think that so many actors don't even get the experience to be interviewed before they get the chance to be on a leading show or whatever. And the fact that you've reached out to everyone, every person that's been a part of like a small little part of an A24 thing, like it's so, I feel so valued in so many ways. And I truly appreciate, you taking the time, because if anything, listening to these episodes, I've just learned so much about these people. And I feel like it's such a beautiful community you're creating under the guise of this whole industry that we're
just
in.
Kind of hope that people will just go like, everyone's got a story, whether like what was that story of the guy that's like the white knight server or person that was this, like everyone's got their story about how they've gone on and made it, even for whether someone's done something for a few seconds or a few minutes, or they've done work behind the scenes that you never knew about. Like that's all part of that kind of community that brings these work. And it's always fascinating to hear people's stories about making it in the art world. It's fascinating to me, and I view everyone that does that as brave. I was speaking about it with someone last week, was like people working in the arts in COVID, they didn't have this, they didn't have that protection, they didn't have that, and it's fascinating to people that still kept up that world, and hopefully everyone gets the rewards from it.
And it's yeah, no, truly. And honestly, like I just recently, like my first job back into the industry from the pandemic, I was a COVID PA, Damien Chazelle's Babylon, and just seeing the extent in which the industry's changed since COVID's hit is so insane. You know, it's the amount of money that we have to spend on keeping everyone safe. You know, I wish, you know, I hope that this ends soon, because at the end of the day, it's so it's such a different job with COVID on our shoulders. And yeah, no, I'm sending all my best to everyone. I'm sending my best to you and everyone out there, and really thank you so much for having me, man.
That's not a problem. And one thing you mentioned, like social media platforms, like what are your like ats that you would recommend people following and searching for on Instagram, etc.?
Yeah, honestly, the main one, you can find all my other ats on this one main one, but my main Instagram is at Laith Zuaiter. Laith spelled like faith with an L.